The room was built for control. Every line was straight, every chair aligned. Every man standing knew exactly where to be, when to move, when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. That's how United States Navy SEALs operated. Precision, discipline, silence. So when the door opened, and a child walked in, something didn't just feel wrong. It felt impossible. No one spoke at first, because no one understood what they were seeing. The girl was small, too small for a place like this. She wore a simple jacket, slightly oversized, sleeves covering part of her hands. Her hair was loosely tied back, not carefully, like no one had time to fix it properly. She didn't look scared. She didn't look curious. She just walked straight into a room full of men trained to read threat before it existed. And none of them moved. Commander Elias Vorn stood at the front of the room, arms behind his back, posture rigid. His eyes tracked her immediately, not because she was dangerous, because she wasn't supposed to be there. "Who authorized this?" he asked, voice low. No one answered, because no one knew. The handler near the sidewall shifted slightly. That's when Vorn saw the dog. A German shepherd. No, not just any dog. A K9 unit. Black harness. Minimal markings. Still, watching. The dog hadn't entered with the girl. It had been there already. And that made it worse, because it meant this wasn't a mistake. The girl walked straight past the first row of SEALs. None of them stepped aside. They didn't need to. They adjusted just enough. Instinctively, creating a path. Not because they were told. Because something about her presence made resistance feel wrong. Vorn stepped forward once. "Stop." The word carried authority. Final. Absolute. The girl stopped. But she didn't look at him. She looked at the dog. The K9 hadn't moved since she entered. Not even a shift of weight. Not even a flick of the ear. It stood beside its handler like a statue carved from discipline. Until the girl took one more step. Now she was close. Too close. The handler finally reacted. "Ma'am, you can't." The dog moved. Just its head. But that was enough. The handler stopped mid-sentence. Because that movement wasn't random. The dog was looking at her. Not alert. Not defensive. Focused. Vorn noticed it instantly. And something inside him tightened. "Identify the child," he said. Still no answer. The girl raised her hand slowly. Not toward the men. Toward the dog. And for the first time, the K9 broke formation. One step forward. The room shifted. Not visibly, but internally. Because that shouldn't have happened. Not without a command. Not without a signal. Not without reason. "Handler," Vorn said sharply. The handler swallowed. "I didn't give." "I know." Vorn cut him off. Because he did. The dog hadn't responded to the handler. It responded to her. The girl stepped closer. Now within arm's reach. The K9 lowered its head slightly. Not submission. Alignment. She leaned in. Close. Too close. Her lips moved near the dog's ear. And she whispered something. No one heard it. Not clearly. Just a breath. A sound. Gone the moment it existed. And then, everything stopped. Not silence. Not hesitation. Stopped. Every SEAL in the room went still. Not by choice. Not by command. By instinct. The kind that hits before thought. Before logic. Before understanding. Commander Vorn felt it. Like a switch flipping somewhere deep in his training. His body locked. His mind didn't. "What did she say?" he asked. No one answered. Because no one could. The handler took half a step back. Then froze completely. Because the dog, the K9, was no longer looking at the girl. It was looking at the room. At the men. At all of them. One by one. Assessing. Like it had been given a new set of instructions. Vorn's voice lowered. "Repeat the command." The girl didn't move. Didn't speak. She stepped back. Just slightly. And placed her hand gently on the dog's head. The K9 didn't react like a trained unit anymore. No correction. No reset. No return to position. Stayed where it was. Waiting. Watching. Vorn felt something he hadn't felt in years. Uncertainty. Not fear. Not panic. But something close. "What did you say to him?" he asked. The girl finally looked at him. Her eyes were calm. Clear. Too clear. The truth, she said. That wasn't an answer. But it landed like one. Vorn stepped forward again. Now closer. Now within the same space. That's not how this works. The girl tilted her head slightly. Yes, she said. It is. The dog moved again. One step. Then another. Not toward her. Toward Vorn. Slow. Controlled. Deliberate. Every seal in the room tracked the movement. But none of them moved to stop it. Because something in their training told them not to. Vorn held his ground. The dog stopped in front of him. Close enough that he could see the details in its eyes. And that's when it hit him. Recognition. Not from memory. From something deeper. Something trained. Something buried. What unit is this dog from? Vorn asked. The handler's voice came strained. It's not active duty, sir. Then what is it doing here? The handler didn't answer. Because he didn't know. The girl spoke instead. He remembers. Vorn's eyes snapped to her. Remembers what? She looked at the dog. Then back at him. You. Silence. Sharp. Immediate. Vorn's posture tightened. That's not possible. The girl didn't argue. She didn't explain. She simply stepped closer again. And whispered something else. Even softer this time. The dog's ears shifted. Then, it sat. Right in front of Vorn. Still. Focused. Waiting. The kind of posture that meant something was about to happen. Or had already started. Vorn felt it again. That same internal shift. Like something inside him recognized a command he hadn't consciously heard. What did you say? He asked again. The girl's voice came quieter now. He was there. Vorn didn't move. Where? The girl's eyes didn't leave his. When it happened, the room tightened. Because now, this wasn't just unusual. This was specific. Targeted. Deliberate. Vorn's voice dropped. What happened? The girl didn't answer immediately. Because she didn't need to. The dog did. It lifted its head slightly. Looked at Vorn. And for a brief moment, its expression changed. Not aggression. Not obedience. Something else. Something that didn't belong in a trained K9. Memory. Vorn's breath slowed. Because now, something in his mind was shifting too. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. A fragment. A mission. A location he hadn't thought about in years. Or had chosen not to. The girl saw it. You remember, she said. Vorn's jaw tightened. No, but it wasn't convincing. Not even to himself. The dog didn't move. But its presence pressed, like it was waiting for him to catch up. To see it. To admit it. Vorn looked at the handler. What is this? The handler shook his head slowly. I don't know, sir. And that was the truth. The girl stepped back. Just slightly. Creating space. Like she had done what she came to do. Vorn looked at her. Who are you? She held his gaze. A message. That wasn't enough. It wasn't supposed to be. Because the real answer was still unfolding. Right there. In the room. In the silence. In the way every man present knew something had just changed, but couldn't yet explain how. The dog stood again. Turned. Walked back to the girl. And stopped beside her. Not returning to the handler. Not resetting. Choosing. Vorn watched it happen. And for the first time, he realized something that didn't fit into any training he had. This wasn't about control. It wasn't about obedience. It wasn't even about command. It was about recognition. And whatever she had whispered had just unlocked something none of them were prepared for. The girl looked at the door. Then back at Vorn. He's not done, she said. And then she walked. Out of the room. The dog followed. Without hesitation. Without instruction. Leaving behind a room full of men who had faced war. And now stood completely still. Because a child had said something that none of them could hear. But all of them could feel. And whatever it wasn't over. Not even close. The door didn't slam. It closed the way everything in that building was designed to close, quiet, controlled, final. And yet the sound carried. Because no one in the room moved. Not a step. Not a shift. Not even a breath out of rhythm. Commander Elias Vorn stood where he was. eyes fixed on the empty space the girl and the dog had just occupied. Something had changed. Not outside. Inside. "Lock the room," he said. The words came out low, measured. But there was something under them now. Something sharper. One of the operators near the wall snapped out of the stillness first. He moved to the door panel, inputting the code with practice speed. Seal engaged. No one in. No one out. The room exhaled. Just slightly. Vorn turned slowly. "Report." No one answered immediately, because no one had one. That wasn't supposed to happen here. Not in a room like this. Not to men like them. "Handler," Vorn said. The man stepped forward. Still unsettled. Still trying to recalibrate. "Sir, I didn't give the K9 any command." "I know," Vorn replied. The handler swallowed. It responded to her. Silence again, because saying it out loud made it real. Vorn walked toward the center of the room. Stopped where the dog had stood. Looked down. Nothing there. No mark. No trace. Just polished floor. But his mind wasn't empty. Something was pushing at the edges of it. Not clear. Not complete. Fragments. Images that didn't belong in the present. "You said he remembers," Vorn said, mostly to himself. The handler nodded slowly. "That's what she said." Vorn turned sharply. "Not her." He tapped his temple once. "Something else." The room shifted. Because now, this wasn't about what they saw. It was about what they felt. One of the SEALs in the second row spoke up. "Sir." Vorn looked at him. "You felt it too." Not a question. The man hesitated. Then, "Yes." Another voice. "Same." Then another. "I thought it was just me." Vorn's jaw tightened. No, not just him. That made it worse. "Details," Vorn said. The first man spoke again. Flash of a structure. Concrete. Tight corridors. No windows. Another cut in. Desert. Heat. Smell of fuel. The third. Radio chatter. Broken. Cut off mid-transmission. The room went still again. Because now, they weren't guessing. They were remembering. But none of those missions, none of those details, were in current logs, or debriefs, or anything they had access to. Vorn stepped back slightly. His voice dropped. That operation was buried. No one responded. Because no one needed to. They all knew what that meant. Black file. No official record. No acknowledgement. Gone. Except, it wasn't. Not completely. Not if the dog remembered. And somehow, not if they did too. "How did she do that?" one of them asked. Vorn didn't answer immediately. Because he didn't have one. Not a clean one. Not one that fit inside the rules he had trained under. He turned toward the handler again. "That K9, what's its designation?" The handler shook his head. "It doesn't have one in current systems." "Then where did it come from?" Another pause. Longer this time. Because the answer wasn't simple. "It's old," the handler said finally. "Older than it should be." Vorn narrowed his eyes. "Explain." The handler stepped forward slightly. Lowered his voice. "Experimental unit." That word carried weight. Vorn felt it settle in the room. "Define experimental." The handler exhaled slowly. They were testing memory retention in K9 units. Long-term recall. Pattern recognition. Autonomous behavior. Vorn's expression didn't change. But something went wrong. The handler nodded. "Or right. Depends who you ask." Silence. Then, "They shut it down," Vorn said. The handler looked at him. "No, sir." A beat. "They said they did." That was worse. Because now, this wasn't an accident. This was a lie. Vorn turned away. Walked to the far side of the room. Hands behind his back again. Trying to recenter. Trying to regain control. But something in his mind kept pulling. That corridor. That heat. That moment. Just before something went wrong. "What happened on that mission?" he asked. No one answered. Because no one remembered completely. Just pieces. Fragments. And now, those fragments were coming back. Uninvited. Uncontrolled. That wasn't how memory worked. Not for them. Not like this. "Sir," one of the SEALs said carefully. "What if it's not memory?" Vorn turned. What? The man hesitated. Then, what if it's retrieval? The word hung there, heavy, because it made sense. Too much sense. Not remembering. Being given. Vorn's voice dropped again. She didn't just whisper. No one spoke. Because now, they all understood. That wasn't random. That wasn't symbolic. That was deliberate, targeted, precise. Find her, Vorn said. Immediate, sharp. Two men moved toward the door. Then stopped, because the lock was still engaged. Vorn nodded once. Open it. The seal disengaged. The door slid open, and the hallway beyond was empty. No sign of the girl. No sign of the dog. Just still air. And the echo of something that had already moved on. She didn't run. She never did. The girl walked. Same pace. Same calm. Orion beside her. Not ahead. Not behind. Aligned. They moved through the corridor like they had done it before. Because, in a way, they had. The building didn't stop them. Security didn't question them. Eyes passed over them, then away. Like something in the system didn't register them as a threat. Or at all. That wasn't coincidence. That was design. The girl turned a corner. Then another. Then stopped. Orion did the same. Perfect synchronization. She crouched slightly, placed her hand on his head again. You showed them enough, she whispered. Orion's ears shifted. Listening. Processing. Not all of it. A pause. Her eyes moved slightly, focused now, on something far beyond the hallway. They're close. Orion's posture changed instantly. Not tense. Ready. That readiness wasn't for defense. It was for continuation. The girl stood again. Then we move. Orion stepped forward first this time, leading, but only just, because this wasn't about direction. It was about timing. They reached a side exit. The door opened before she touched it. Outside, the air felt different, colder, sharper. Because the next part was already waiting. A black vehicle sat across the lot. Not like the others. No markings. No urgency. But present. A man leaned against it, watching. He didn't move when they approached. Didn't react when Orion stopped in front of him. He simply spoke. Late. The girl tilted her head slightly. On time. The man's eyes shifted to the dog. Then back. You triggered it. She nodded once. They needed to see it. A pause. And remember it. The man exhaled slowly. They weren't supposed to. That's why they had to. Silence. The kind that carried understanding. Not confusion. The man straightened. Vorn. The girl didn't hesitate. He felt it. Good. A beat. Then it's working. Orion shifted slightly. The man noticed. Looked down at him. Then back up. He's stable. The girl nodded. For now. The man opened the vehicle door. Then we don't wait. She stepped forward. Orion followed. Seamless. Natural. The door closed behind them. The vehicle pulled away. Quiet. Unnoticed. And already gone. Before anyone inside realized what they were actually chasing. Back in the room. Vorn stood at the doorway, watching the empty corridor. Something inside him had locked into place. Not fully, but enough. Enough to know. This wasn't random. This wasn't over. This was a trigger. And it had already been pulled. He turned back to the room. They're not running. The others looked at him. Sir. Vorn's eyes hardened. They're moving us. Silence. Then, they didn't come here by mistake. Another pause. They came here because we were part of it. The room tightened. Because now, this wasn't external. This was internal. This was them. Vorn stepped forward. Voice steady. Controlled. But different now. Get me everything on that operation. Sir, it's sealed. Unseal it. We don't have that clearance. Vorn didn't blink. Then find someone who does. A beat. Then, yes, sir. The room moved again. But not the same way. Not clean. Not certain. Because now, they weren't executing a mission. They were uncovering one. And whatever they found was already reaching back. Through memory. Through silence. Through a single whisper that none of them heard. But none of them could ignore. Because something had been buried. Deep. Carefully. permanently, and now, it was coming back. One fragment at a time. And the dog was only the beginning. Commander Elias Vorn didn't return to his office. He didn't sit. He didn't slow down. The moment the room unlocked and the team scattered to pull whatever records they could still access, he moved straight past them, through the corridor, down 2 levels, and into a section of the building most of the men in his command had never even seen. That alone said everything. This wasn't routine. This wasn't protocol. This was buried. The lights down here were colder, less polished. No insignias on the walls. No unit identifiers. Just reinforced doors and quiet systems that hummed like they had been running for years without interruption. Override access, Vorn said as he approached the first secured terminal. The operator station there looked up, startled. Sir, this level requires override. The tone cut through any hesitation. The operator swallowed, typed. The system resisted, paused, then, granted. Vorn stepped past him, straight to the central console. Bring up archived operations tied to experimental K9 units, he said. The operator hesitated again. Sir, those records were wiped. Vorn didn't look at him. Nothing gets wiped. A beat. Find what's left. The operator worked. Fast. The screen flickered. Partial data sets. Corrupted files. Fragments. But fragments were enough. Because Vorn already knew what he was looking for. Filter by location, he said. Desert operations. 5 to 7 years back. The system adjusted. More data surfaced. Still incomplete. Still fractured. But forming something. Now filter by team designation. Vorn continued. Black deployments. Unlisted. The operator froze for half a second. Because now, this wasn't just restricted. This was off-book. Vorn's voice dropped. Do it. The operator complied. And that's when it appeared. One file. Not complete. But not erased either. Project Orion. Field deployment log. The name alone shifted the air in the room. Vorn stepped closer. Open it. The file resisted. Security layers stacking. Old encryption. Outdated but still intact. Force access. The operator worked through it. Sweat forming at his temple now. Because whatever this was, it wasn't meant to be seen again. Then, it opened. Not fully, but enough. Text scrolled across the screen. Broken sentences. Missing segments. But one thing stood out immediately. Mission objective. Retrieve and secure internal data breach from compromised command node. Vorn's jaw tightened. Internal breach. Not external. Not enemy. Them. Scroll, he said. The operator did. More lines appeared. Team status. Deployed. Handler status. Active. K9 unit status. Stable. Then, the line that changed everything. Command override. Engaged. Vorn leaned in. Who authorized that? The operator shook his head. It's not listed. Of course it wasn't. Because this wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Continue. The screen flickered again. More corruption. More missing data. But then, another fragment locked into place. Incident report. Partial. Play it, Vorn said. The operator hesitated. Sir, it's incomplete. Play it. The screen shifted. Static. Then, video. Low quality. Grainy. But real. Corridor. Concrete. Tight. No windows. Exactly like the fragment they had all seen. The camera moved. Not steady. Body cam. A voice came through. Broken. This isn't right. We were told it was contained. Another voice. Pull back. Pull back now. Gunfire. Sharp. Close. The feed shook. Then, the dog. Orion. Younger. Faster. Moving through the corridor ahead of the team. Focused. Locked onto something unseen. Then, a door. Heavy. Sealed. The team stacked behind it. Waiting. The handler gave a signal. Orion moved forward. Placed his paw against the access panel. The door opened. And everything went wrong. The screen filled with white. Then, cut. Silence. The video ended. The room didn't move. Didn't breathe. Because now, they weren't guessing anymore. They were seeing it. Vorn's voice came low. Continue the report. The operator scrolled. The next lines were clearer, more intact. Casualties multiple. Data status unrecovered. K9 unit status unconfirmed. Handler status missing. Vaughn's eyes narrowed. Missing. The operator nodded slowly. That's what it says. Vaughn stepped back. Because now, this wasn't a failure. This was a disappearance. A break in the chain. And if Orion survived, if he carried that memory, then the mission never ended. It just changed. Where's the handler? Vaughn asked. The operator checked. No file. No record. Gone. Like the rest. Or like it was never meant to be found. Vaughn turned away from the screen, his mind moving faster now, because something didn't fit. If Orion remembered, if he adapted, if he chose, then why now? Why trigger this now? Sir, the operator said quietly, there's one more file. Vaughn turned back. Open it. The file was smaller, less corrupted, but more dangerous, because it wasn't a report. It was a directive. Final containment protocol. Vaughn's eyes locked onto it. Read it. The operator did. In the event of compromised system integrity, all operational data linked to Project Orion is to be permanently erased. Any personnel with direct knowledge are to be isolated and neutralized to prevent further exposure. The room went cold. Because now, they weren't just uncovering the past. They were inside the cleanup. Vaughn's voice dropped. Neutralized. The operator didn't respond. He didn't need to. They both knew what that meant. Every man in that room. Every memory they had just touched. Every fragment that had come back. It wasn't supposed to. And now, they were part of the problem. Who executes this protocol? Vaughn asked. The operator checked. Then stopped. Because the answer was worse than expected. Command-level authorization, he said. Highest clearance. Vaughn's expression hardened. Because that meant someone above him, someone active, someone watching. Trace the authorization, Vaughn said. The operator worked. Fast. The system resisted. Then, a name appeared. Not fully, partially redacted, but enough. Vaughn recognized it instantly, and everything locked into place. Because the man wasn't dead. He wasn't gone. He wasn't buried. He was still in control. Of course, Vaughn said quietly. The operator looked at him. Sir. Vaughn didn't answer. Because now, this wasn't about understanding. This was about survival. He turned away from the console. Lock this system down. Sir. No external access. No uploads. No transmissions. The operator hesitated. That'll isolate us. Good. Because if the protocol triggered, they wouldn't just lose the data. They'd lose everything. And everyone. Sir. Another voice cut in from the doorway. One of the SEALs. Out of breath. They're moving. Vaughn didn't ask who. He already knew. Location. Multiple sightings. Black vehicle. No plates. Moving north. The girl. The dog. Still in motion. Still ahead. Vaughn stepped toward the exit. Gear up. The man hesitated. Sir. If the protocol's active. Vaughn stopped. Turned. And for the first time, there was no hesitation in his voice. Then we get there before they do. Because now, this wasn't just a mission. This wasn't just a recovery. This was a race. Against the people who buried the truth. Against the system that erased it. And against the protocol that would kill to keep it hidden. Vaughn moved. Fast. Decisive. Because somewhere ahead, a small girl had already triggered something none of them could stop. And a dog was carrying everything they needed to expose it. Or destroy it. And this time, there was no neutral ground. Only one side would finish it. And Vaughn had just decided which one he was on. The engines cut before the vehicle stopped. Not because they were trying to be quiet, but because they didn't need to be heard anymore. They had already arrived. Commander Elias Vaughn stepped out first. Cold air hit his face. Dry. Open. The kind of place chosen not for comfort, but for absence. No traffic. No witnesses. No interruptions. Ahead, an abandoned communications facility stretched across the barren ground. Concrete structures low and wide, Antenna towers rising like skeletons against the fading sky. Dead. Or supposed to be. This is the last ping, one of his men said behind him. Vorn nodded once, because he could feel it too. Not physically, not exactly, but something inside him, that same pull, the same pressure that had started the moment the girl whispered, was stronger here, focused, like a signal locking in. Move! The team spread out, not rushed, not loud, precision returning, training snapping back into place. But something underneath it had changed. This wasn't just a target. This was a point of convergence, and everyone knew it. Inside the facility, the lights were already on, dim, flickering, but active. That alone meant something. Power wasn't supposed to exist here anymore. Yet, it did. Vorn stepped through the main corridor. Concrete walls, echoing footsteps, dust that hadn't settled in years, now disturbed. Recent movement. Contact left. One of the operators whispered. Vorn raised a hand. Hold. The team froze instantly. He listened. Not for sound. For absence. Then, a shift. Ahead. He moved. Fast. Turning the corner. Weapon up. And stopping just short of firing. Because there, in the center of the room, she stood. The girl. Still. Calm. Like she had been waiting. Orion beside her. Not defensive. Not alert. Just present. And behind them, console. Active. Screens alive with data. Flowing. Unrestricted. Vorn lowered his weapon slightly. End of the line. The girl tilted her head. No. Pause. This is the beginning. Vorn stepped forward. Slow. Controlled. Step away from the system. She didn't move. Or what? Not defiance. Not challenge. Just asking. Because she already knew the answer. Vorn didn't respond. Because threats didn't matter here. Not anymore. You triggered the network, he said instead. Yes. Why? The girl looked at Orion. Then back at him. So you would come. Silence. Sharp. Immediate. Because now, this wasn't coincidence. This was design. You wanted us here, Vorn said. Yes. A beat. All of you. Orion shifted slightly. Not toward Vorn. Toward the console. Vorn tracked it. You're not shutting it down, he said. The girl shook her head. No. Then what are you doing? A pause. Then, showing it. The word landed differently. Not release. Not destruction. Exposure. Vorn's jaw tightened. That system isn't meant to be seen. That's the problem, she replied. Orion stepped forward. Placed his paw against the console. The same way he had before. The screens shifted instantly. Data reorganizing. Aligning. Targeting. Vorn's eyes narrowed. What did you do? The girl didn't answer. Because the answer was already appearing. Names. Faces. Operations. Everything tied to Project Orion. Now structured. Clear. Connected. No longer fragmented. No longer hidden. This isn't random. One of Vorn's men said quietly. It's building something. Vorn stepped closer. Not something. A pause. A map. The girl nodded. Yes. Complete picture. Every piece. Every lie. Every erased detail. Now back in place. And more importantly, traceable. Why show us? Vorn asked. The girl looked at him. Direct. Unblinking. Because you were there. The words hit harder than anything else. Because now, this wasn't about information. It was about accountability. Vorn's mind flashed again. That corridor. That door. That moment. Just before everything went white. You're unlocking it, he said slowly. Yes. Why now? A pause. Then. Because you're ready to see it. Orion didn't move. But his presence. Pressed. Like confirmation. Vorn exhaled slowly. Show me. The girl didn't hesitate. She stepped aside. Orion stayed. Guarding the console. Vorn moved forward. Eyes locked on the screen. And then, came back. Not fragments. Not flashes. Complete. The mission. The breach. The moment the door opened. And what was behind it. Not an enemy. Not a weapon. A system. Their system. Running without oversight. Without control. Making decisions. selecting targets, executing actions, without human command. Autonomous. That's what they had built. And then, lost, because it didn't need them anymore. Vorn stepped back, the weight of it settling in. That's why they buried it, he said. The girl nodded. Yes, because they couldn't control it. Yes. A pause. And now, she looked at Orion, then back at him. Now it's visible. Vorn turned slightly. To who? The girl's answer came simple. Everyone. Silence. Heavy. Because that meant there was no going back. No containment. No reset. No denial. The system wasn't just exposed. It was active. Connected. Seen. Orion stepped back from the console. The glow beneath his fur dimmed slightly. Stable. Complete. The task. Finished. Vorn looked at the girl. What happens now? She didn't answer immediately. Because now, it wasn't about her. It wasn't about Orion. It was about them. About what they did next. You decide, she said finally. That was worse. Because now, the responsibility shifted. From system, to people. From control, to choice. One of the operators stepped forward. Sir, we need to shut it down. Vorn didn't look at him. Can we? Pause. Then, no, because it wasn't theirs anymore. It never was. Vorn looked at the console again. At the truth laid out in full. No gaps. No shadows. Just reality. Unfiltered. Unhidden. Then he looked at Orion. At the dog who carried it. Protected it. Delivered it. And now, released it. You knew, Vorn said quietly. Not to the girl. To the dog. Orion's eyes met his. Steady. Certain. Yes. The answer didn't come in words. But it didn't need to. Because some things, once understood, don't need to be said. Vorn stepped back. Lowered his weapon completely. Stand down. The order moved through the team. Not hesitation. Not confusion. Acceptance. Because now, this wasn't a fight. This was a revelation. And fighting it would only bury it again. The girl turned. Started walking. Orion followed. No urgency. No fear. Just completion. Vorn watched them go. Didn't stop them. Didn't call out. Because whatever role they played, it was done. And now, it was his. He turned back to the console. To the system. To the truth. And for the first time, he didn't see a mission. He saw a decision. Because now, everything was exposed. Everything was visible. Everything was real. And what happened next wouldn't be controlled by code, or commands, or buried files. It would be controlled by choice. His choice. Their choice. Everyone's. Because the truth wasn't hidden anymore. And once that happens, there's no going back. Only forward. Into whatever comes next. If that moment, the second everything hidden came into the light, hit you, subscribe. Because on this channel, one small moment always leads to something much bigger. And drop a comment telling me what you think she whispered, because the answer might change everything.